I don't have many jobs to do on Suzi the FZ50, mostly because she's so reliable. However, there is one job that's needed doing for some time now, and that is the fuel gauge. The fuel gauge stopped working quite some time ago when the cork, and it is literally a cork, on the end of the control arm fell off. And you can't see anything in there because it's pitch black, but I assure you the thing hasn't worked for ages. The other issue is that the screen has become clouded for whatever reason. So for quite a long time I've been looking for a replacement fuel gauge for this bike, and eventually I found one. Fresh in from Colombia. This particular package has about 1,000 stamps on, all from Colombia. The interesting thing is that they're celebrating Mahatma Gandhi in one of them, and the others are just plain interesting. So yeah, $25 worth. I don't know if that's US dollars. I don't know if the Colombian economy is tied to the US dollar. But anyway, this package arrived from Colombia. It took 6.5 weeks to get here. I think it was rowed over by the guy who sold it to me in his rubber dinghy. There we go. So, replacement fuel gauge. In the packet, as far as I can tell, you have the plastic outer cover, which you can see on the original there. You have the metal plate that goes underneath, the gasket, the new clear gauge, and it looks like possibly on later models they've finally got round to using polystyrene type or plastic type float rather than the traditional cork. Hopefully this will solve the problem of me not being able to tell how much fuel's in it. Normally I do so many miles and then periodically check the tank, but it'd be nice to be able to do it at a glance. Okay, so a job that I've not been able to do for many years because of lack of parts. I've not seen one come up on eBay for, well, as long as I've had the bike. So today's job is to switch that over. The first job I'll have is to remove the rack so that I can get at the fuel gauge itself. Not that the paintwork's in pristine condition. I don't really want to restore the paintwork on this. I'd like to keep it in its original patina. There we go. So yes, so we need to remove this plate here. Interestingly, the metal plate actually has full and empty written on it too. These are 10 mils on here. Because the lighting cables are still attached to the rack, I am going to support it up here. Interesting. Okay, that, I don't know how well you can see that. That is an old wine cork which is saturated with fuel and has sunk and therefore is no longer usable. I know it's a wine cork because many years ago, when the original cork disintegrated, I replaced it with that. I don't think it's been very effective, so it's time now to replace it with the new fuel gauge. This is a good opportunity to inspect the inside of the fuel tank, as I can get a light source in there. You can see that there is a little bit of corrosion and debris has built up in the corners of the tank. I believe that is rust particles. Hang on, let me get this right. I believe that is rust particles that have fallen off the what is effectively the top inside of the tank, which obviously isn't always coated in fuel and therefore suffers with corrosion a bit more than other parts. But generally speaking, it doesn't look too bad. That pickup there is for the reserve, and if I tilt it back you can see the main fuel feed, the reserve being lower than the main feed. But generally speaking, the inside of the tank doesn't look too bad. I'm thinking I might put a magnet in there and just see if I can pick up any of the loose rust particles if they're magnetic, and maybe clear out some of that crud, but I don't want to drain the whole tank. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that, but all that crud on the end of the magnet is iron oxide, so I'm going to fish out as much of that as possible before I put the new filler in. Stop slosh. It's just a shame it doesn't come with new screws, but then why would it? Okay, so we've got the new gauge, which has a gasket with it. We've got the metal plate, it helps secure that down. We've got the new sight glass and a rubber O-ring that goes with that, and a new plastic. I thought it would be prudent to offer up the old one to the new one, and it does look identical. Obviously this one is missing its float. Originally it was cork, as I said. Now they've gone over to a styrene or plastic based float, but they're the same length, which is good news. There we go. Just take a bit of a wiggle. Using an angle. Just putting a blob of grease on the ends of these screws because they're a little bit corroded. They actually stick out into the bottom of the tank, so they get washed with petrol, and I think the petrol wicks up through the threads. I don't know how long this grease will stay on there, but it'll help, certainly in the short term. Go, brand new fuel gauge. So there, very quick job, very boring job, but there's so little jobs I have to do with this bike because it's just so reliable as a rule. I probably made it harder than it was by fishing around for rust in the tank. I'm also going to take this opportunity to clean around the underside of the tank. I gave the bike a good clean the other day and got a lot of crud out, but whilst the tank's loose you can see under there's a bit of stuff that has accumulated, so I will take this opportunity to get a wipe in there and clean it out. So yeah, and then I'm going to button it up. As a side note, I am going to put in a small splash of two-stroke oil into the tank. This has a oil pump in it, so it doesn't need this, but the reason I'm doing it is because of the small amount of corrosion that's in there. I just want to add a little bit of oil to coat the inside of the tank, and help prevent further corrosion. Now it will wash out every time I fuel up, but if I remember occasionally to do it, it should leave some oil residue behind, hopefully.